I call Daniel Johnson to speak to Amendment 23 and other amendments in the group. Mr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Look, can I begin by thanking the Government for bringing forward the amendments that were just outlined by the Minister, that cover off broadly the same area in terms of clarifying the process. I think that does improve the bill and it does improve the clarity of the process, and I thank them for doing so. But I think also in terms of what we've just heard from the Minister, outlines some of the issues that I think are still with this bill, because it's a framework bill. This is inherently a complex and technical area of law, one that is very important, but one where actually the precise mechanisms that will be implemented aren't clear because they'll be brought forward by regulation. Now, I think it's, of course, positive that the Government have brought forward draft regulations, but it was only just last week that the Economy Committee were able to look at those. So the amendments that we brought forward in this group actually go to this point, about the nature of framework bills and their both efficacy, but also how well they address what are fundamentally technical points of law. So Paul O'Kane's amendment is about actually ensuring that those things that are features set out in the bill are brought forward as a matter of regulation, so we have clarity about what the features of this legislation will do. Because without it, frankly, we just have an indication rather than a guarantee of those features. And likewise with mine. And I listened closely to what the Minister said. But the reality is, if you look at subsection 3 of section 1, it states this, that regulations under this section may make different provisions for different purposes and modify any enactment. Now, I am not a lawyer, and I will happily defer to those that are. And I see Myrtle Fraser smiling as I say that. But I don't see in that wording that does restrict ministers in the way that the Minister just set out. It does seem to me that if you can make regulations for different provisions, for different purposes, and altering any act, that is an incredibly broad scope of regulating making powers. Now, there are, of course, circumstances where regulating making powers are a much more sensible approach, particularly when you're talking about percentages or levies or numerical amounts that may need to change because of circumstances. But at the other end of the spectrum, we have very broadly stated provisions where we cannot scrutinise the legislation. And what I am merely seeking to do is that under this Act, the ministers can bring forward regulations that seek to deal with the purposes as set out within this Act. I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm happy to be persuaded otherwise that my reading of the law is not accurate. But otherwise, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that regulation-making powers are limited to the purposes and functions as set out within an Act of Parliament. And that is simply why I'm offering my amendment in this section. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Johnson.